So happy Groundhog Day, everybody. And Sharon tells us that Wyerton Willie at least saw his shadow, and that I think that means the good spring weather will be sooner than later. So let's hope Wyerton Willie is right on this year. I'm going to read our land acknowledgement, and I would ask that as I'm reading these words, you would reflect on them and what they mean to you and what do they mean to the Indigenous nations that are mentioned in the acknowledgement. Toronto is in the dish with one spoon territory. The dish with one spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. Next slide, please. And so what's going to be happening today? Welcome to everybody. And I'm just taking a little peek. So there's lots of us here. There's 57 people in the group right now. And what's going to be happening today is we're going to hear about our club and what's been going on with the interest groups and some future directions. Michael Barkley and Peggy Liswood are going to talk to us about future directions for the club. Following their presentation, we're going to break out into smaller groups for discussion and response to the future directions. And then we'll come back to the large group, share what we've talked about, and continue the discussion, questions and comments in the larger group. Of course, we only have so much time today, so as we're wrapping up, I will talk about the action of the day and upcoming meetings. As usual, while we formally close the meeting off at about 11:30, you are welcome to stay around and chat and continue the conversation. So with that, can we have the next slide? So our interest groups and our working groups are part of our club, and they are smaller groups that have taken on special projects. They have particular interests in a particular area. So you can belong to one, you can belong to many. And so today we're going to have an update from those interest groups, starting with the COP26 group. It was an ad hoc group that formed to monitor and follow what was happening at COP26, and they did a lot of work. It was very interesting, and it just goes to show that our members can come together on important topics from time to time, as well as participate in ongoing interest groups. And of course, our newest interest group, Nature-Based Solutions, has evolved as the club has evolved. So I'm going to turn this over to Karen Sadlier-Brown to let us know what the COP26 group got up to.
Great. Thank you, Judy. Thanks very much. So the working group looked at COP26 over a number of months as we led up to it and looked at the follow-up to it. 2015, so Carolyn, I'm going to let you just go forward. Great. 2015, the Paris Agreement was certainly the backdrop to COP26. And as we know, there were nearly 200 nations that agreed to limit global warming to well below 2%, preferably 1.5 versus pre-industrial levels. They also agreed at the same time to report back every 5 years, hence COP26, originally to meet in 2020, but postponed due to the pandemic. So 2 weeks of protest, presentations, and negotiations. What came out of it? Next slide, Carolyn. So what was achieved and what wasn't? One of the key things that happened was related to a mechanism in COP20, in the Paris Agreement, called the ratchet mechanism. And in that they were agreed that they would come back every 5 years, but it soon became apparent that they weren't going to meet the climate ambition that was required. And so they agreed to return in 2022 rather than in 2025. So we'll see them in Egypt next November. One of the most contentious debates was the wording around coal. It was the first time actually COP in any COP that a fossil fuel was actually named as a cause of climate change. It's stunning actually to think of that, but it was the case. And at the last moment, many had hoped that it would be phased out, but the Indians came in and it backed by the Chinese, and they ended up saying phased down. I think there is a death knell, hopefully, for coal in any event. The third thing that they did was financial assistance, but did some more discussions, certainly on financial assistance for developing countries. Developed countries didn't fulfill their 2009 agreement to provide 100 billion in every year in aid to developing countries. And they agreed to make it happen at long last by 2025. But there were huge debates, and this was certainly not enough for all of those countries that are threatened. Certainly, any of the island nations and many others. It was a very contentious and difficult issue, and it's bound to come back more and more. The last couple of things that they did were first private capital, and this was Mark Carney's exercise of bringing together about 450 financial organizations together, controlling significant funds to back clean technology and try to direct financing away from industries who burn fossil fuel. This is when you see, though, the issues of fiduciary responsibility and other issues coming in. And so no commitment was made by those companies, but hope that this was the beginning of a path to basically stop financing fossil fuel production. There was a lot of technical stuff. It sounds not important, but they had never clarified the rules on carbon trading, reporting, and transparency. And you can't measure it if you, and really manage it rather, if you can't measure it. So I think this is one that's sort of that isn't too sexy, but really important. Lastly, there were on the next slide, it shows us there were a whole range of multilateral agreements. US and China came together, a surprise, particularly given the contention that they've had, but to really try to work together, which was important. The deforestation, also important. We really hope that they live up to those agreements. So the global methane pledge, which more than 100 countries agreed to 30% cut in methane. This is potentially one of the really big pledges as they follow through. Transition to zero emission cars, bans, and some other transitions related to trucks. Very nice, except that all the countries that signed were important, except some of the big ones, the US, China, Germany, South Korea, and Japan. So was COP, and the next slide we're going to show you, was it a success or was it not? Bottom line, yes and no. This is a thermometer from the Climate Action Tracker. And you can see we are here now, 1.2 degrees warming, not so far away from 1.5 degrees, the goal. So it's a really tight timeline. And I think this more than anything points to how urgent it is to act now, and that we really need to act within the next decade. It can't be put off. The policies and actions, the first bar, show you where we are right now, but the really key one I'm going to show you is the next one, which is 2030, with the targets only. Those are the commitments that countries have made. The median between 3 and 1.9 is the 2.4, far away from the others. So there's a lot that has to happen. I think there was, from participants who came away from COP, a lot of excitement in the fact that they felt that the urgency had finally been joined. We'll see. I think it was summed up more recently by the president of COP26, Alok Sharma. And he said the words on a page that delegates took away from last year's COP26 climate summit will wither on the vine. I think he's mixing metaphors, but I think it's okay if the countries that made the promise don't translate them into urgent action. And that's part of what we're going to try to do is encourage governments, encourage all of us to really translate what we know is coming to urgent action. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for, and we'll just pass this on from the chat. Thank you for a really great, succinct presentation. Appreciate that all the time and effort that your working group took to follow this along and keep us up to date as it was happening. Next on our agenda is Joanne Hunter, and she is going to talk to us about the nature-based solutions interest group and what they've been up to. So Joanne, I hand it over to you.
Hi everybody. I'm delighted to welcome you and tell you about the Nature-Based Solutions group. We're fairly new. We just started back in November. Can we start with the first slide? So why an interest group on nature-based solutions? People's health and the health of our planet are intimately connected. We live in a world where human activity has encroached upon the planet's wild spaces, expanding urban environments and threatening biodiverse natural ecosystems. As a result, we have suffered the loss of important biodiverse habitats, such as old growth forests, wetlands, and the loss of 1 million species of animals. Healthy ecosystems offer us important protections, including carbon storage, air purification, and water filtration. Protecting and expanding our green spaces decreases our exposure to storm runoff, leading to deadly floods, landslides, and other disaster events. Deforestation for the purpose of increasing agricultural space and the commercial lumber forestry has deeply affected our risk for droughts and wildfires. As we humans push into wild habitats, we disrupt the living spaces and habitat needed for many species of animals and increase the risk of being exposed to pathogens to which we have little or no immunity. Next slide, please. So what is the goal of the Nature-Based Solutions group? We are exploring ecologically sustainable solutions to the climate crisis. Our ultimate goal is planetary health, harnessing the power of nature in building resilience in our cities and rural areas and creating healthy communities. Next slide, please. So what have we been up to? Our monthly meetings are organized to include an educational or learning activity 1 month, and then we alternate with a hands-on, action-oriented event the next month, where we can participate in community activities geared towards improving our local environment. Last November, we kicked off our first activity with a tree planting opportunity in the Rouge Valley. We've met with nature stewards from the City of Toronto and Don't Mess with the Don, who are working on the regeneration of the Don Valley. Last month, we engaged in a lively discussion based on the groundbreaking documentary and book Breaking Boundaries, The Science of Our Planet. Tomorrow at our monthly meeting, we'll hear from Michael Poliani, lead for nature-based solutions at Nature Canada. In March, our group is hosting guest speaker Julia Baum, an oceanographer and academic on the effect of climate change on oceans and coral reefs. And in April, we'll be hosting a talk on regenerative farming. Following that, we are planning a trip to an organic farm to observe and learn about ecologically sound farming practices. As you can see, our group is a nice balance of learning and experiencing. Looking after ourselves is important too. We look forward to getting out in nature for meditative walks that are healing and restorative, balancing our need for self-care and connection to nature with the challenging activities we engage in. And last slide, please. Through our understanding of nature-based solutions for climate change and disaster risk reduction, we hope to develop the tools we need to move forward in the fight to protect the planet's biodiversity and climate impacts. Participating in an interest group has other benefits as well. Spending time with a climate of like-hearted, like-minded others, sharing experiences that encourage, strengthen, and support us, and experiencing what it means for each of us to recognize our place in the web of life. I hope that if you love and appreciate all things nature has to offer, you will join us in working towards a more sustainable and healthy planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. I am encouraged and excited. Can you hear me? Yes. Yeah, I'm encouraged and excited by that. I do like to get outdoors. That's the feeling I got, and how important it is for us to have that as a resource. So thank you so much. And now I'm going to call on our climate advocacy group, and Michael Barkley is going to tell us about that.
Hi, everybody. So we've had this interest group right from the beginning of the Climate Action Club. We have about 35 members now, and the idea is to have a forum and opportunity to learn about the issues that are facing policymakers, whether they be government policymakers, business, whether we engage with other organizations that are working on climate solutions and the environment. So we learn, first of all. We're always in that learning mode. We try to connect each other and connect with others outside of the club. And the purpose is to advocate for policies that protect the planet for future generations. That's our goal. We have a lot of emphasis on government solutions, which we'll see in a second. Some of our actions that we get engaged in the advocacy sphere are letter writing campaigns to government, although we have had campaigns as well for writing to businesses such as the Royal Bank. We try to not duplicate things, so when there is a partner organization that we're engaged with who are mounting campaigns such as divestment or the CPP and the way the CPP invests its funds, our funds, the Toronto Advocacy and so on. There's a lot of activity out there in Canada, Ontario, and in Toronto around climate, and we hope to be able to amplify other people's voices by engaging with them when there's a topic that's important to us or interesting to individuals within our group. So we do try to keep those connections going. We've written letters to the editor and learned how to do that, and depositions have happened, and those are sometimes individuals write something or appear before a committee, and we try to mobilize when government surveys are being posted that we should have some comment on. The probably our original focus was mostly on the Government of Canada, although that's changed considerably as time has moved on. We recently mobilized to try to get people to complete a survey that the Ministry of the Environment had posted to try to help the minister plan for his response to the Prime Minister's request for, in the mandate letters, for a plan that has to be produced by the end of March. And it's sort of an example of the kind of issues that were concern to the member of the Climate Advocacy Committee was the focus on carbon capture and storage, which was the Natural Resources Minister's focus, giving tax credits to industry to look at these technological solutions to climate change rather than stopping the release of greenhouse gases into our environment. And there were 400 scientists who protested that, and we were on side with those folks trying to get the government to shift its focus from supporting industry to stopping greenhouse gas emissions. And so, again, actions in this sphere can include drafting submissions, developing our own efforts to do things, and as I said before, supporting other partner organizations. So that's what we've done on the federal side. Now there's a provincial election coming June 2nd. So we're engaged with a couple other organizations to try to make sure that our voices are added to those of others and organizations that are very concerned about what happens on June 2nd. I think all of us in these organizations agree that the current government is a climate denying government. It has absolutely no plans or any interest in stopping the release of greenhouse gases. And our goal is to make sure that candidates or parties that are interested in trying to replace this government have policies and campaign plans that address the kinds of concerns that we've been studying and looking at for the last couple of years. Recently, we broke up into 5 small work groups who are researching topics on adaptation and nature-based solutions, transportation, buildings, industry, and energy. And those subcommittees are coming together to try to put together what we feel are the major issues that we can advocate for during this lead up to the June 2nd election. There's a group of a number of seniors climate action groups that are working together. They're mostly, I think, in Ontario. And there's a larger coalition being planned as well to tackle climate change among all demographic groups that we also are engaged in. So we do both working ourselves to try to figure out what we as members of this group are interested in pursuing, but also linking with other organizations so that we don't duplicate effort. And we also have spent time trying to influence the City of Toronto, both the councillors, the budget process, the process of the development of the Transform Toronto plan. So we monitor what's going on there. We advocate whenever we can to try to increase the ambition of City Council to tackle climate change. The current budget process that is happening right now is a real indication that the city talks about the fact that we're in a climate emergency. It has a Transform Toronto plan, which is quite ambitious, but in fact there is no money being attached to any of these tasks, and without the funds, the opportunity to shift the City of Toronto in the right direction is a challenge. So on March 16th, that's our next meeting, we're going to be discussing the energy system in Ontario and the role of, possibly the role of district heating in that. So we're going to do it's going to be a sort of a presentation and discussion, which we hope will lead to some action that will again lead into the June election. And in our February meeting, we're going to be talking about all these small subgroups I talked about, and they're going to report back. April and May, closer to the election, we're going to focus on learning and action to elect government that places climate first. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. That is wonderful. I have learned a lot about getting voices heard, and your group has taught us how to amplify our voices, and many ways to communicate and figure out how to make a difference. So I applaud the work that you have done and will and plan to do. Our next and final group that we're going to hear from today is the Individual Action Interest Group. And Caroline Taylor is going to tell us about that. Caroline?
Thank you. And I must say that my co-leader, Karen Robbins, is also going to speak. So hang on. So individual action, what are we? And before I talk about what we are, I want to acknowledge that Gary was the originator of this group, and Peggy worked with him, Gary Burrows, and then Karen Robbins came in, and then I have recently joined, but I stand on their shoulders, and I'm really happy to be helping. So what do we do? So here's just a list of things. We come together to share coping strategies. Climate change can be quite overwhelming, to feel more empowered, and to have a sense of community. And at our meetings, we provide and evaluate relevant information. We relate personal experiences, and we listen to and accept those experiences. And we strategize about how to reach into our own networks and talk about climate change. So that is a really accurate description of what we do. It is also comes straight out of Wikipedia on their entry about support groups. And this is part of the community that we feel in these groups. We're an encouragement group. Support group isn't quite the right name, but we certainly encourage and strengthen each other with this action. And so if you feel a little overwhelmed, or if you feel like encouraging others, join our meetings anytime you like. You don't have to specifically join the group, but you can show up at the meetings. With that, I'll hand it over to Karen.
Hi, everyone. So just continuing, thanks, Caroline. So we've all agreed from the beginning that our purpose was to support each other as individuals in our personal goals to live a more sustainable lifestyle. And how it's kind of the areas of focus that we've kind of landed on in order to reduce our carbon footprint, because at the beginning, a lot of us looked at tools to do that, carbon calculators to look at our carbon footprint, but it kind of focuses on three main areas that are about our individual lifestyles, which are our homes, the vehicles that we use to get around, not just cars, bikes, etc., and the food we eat, how it's grown, and also what we choose to eat. I think those would be the three focus areas. And then also learning how to spread the word. Carolyn mentioned that, but talking about climate change with others can be a challenge. Even when you're an individual who wants to make changes, a lot of us live in family units where we have to talk to other people in our family. Maybe we want to talk to our neighbors. Maybe we want to get out and talk to the network of people we know. And this is a difficult subject to talk about. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of misinformation. There might be fear for people. There can be tempers involved. There's kind of the psychology piece along with all of this. So it's so great that in our group, based on that encouragement model, that we can talk to one another about how to do that and how to talk about climate change. We did two things to support us in that in the past. We did a great course on motivational interviewing, which is a psychology approach to understand where people are coming from. And quite a few of us took that course. And then also, Michael Barkley mentioned we don't reinvent the wheel, and Climate Fast is a large climate group that with a great history and track record, and they have an excellent program called Kitchen Table Conversations. And a lot of us took their course, and that's also to help you learn how to talk to others. So just to also give you an idea of some topics we've explored, we looked at carbon footprint measurement tools I mentioned. A bunch of us wanted to understand carbon offsets, and we had mixed feelings about whether they're useful or not, but like a bunch of us, 4 people went off, researched it, came back and presented to the group. We've looked at reducing our food waste. waste management systems in apartments and condos. So we look at our lifestyles. Some of us are in homes, some of us in apartments, some in condos, and things have spun off where people have even started like a composting group in their condo. And we've, obviously strategized with each other how to galvanize people and get things going in our own lives in that way. A big push we've done is we had a monthly meeting about this, about retrofitting our homes and greening our homes, so to speak. And one large thing being looking at how we heat and cool our homes. And we had a presentation at a monthly meeting about heat pumps and how to do that. And in our individual group, we really focused on supporting one another in that journey. And just as an example, next Tuesday at the February Individual Action Interest Group meeting, we're going to share our stories. Some of us, it's been a journey for everyone, and we're going to share some of those stories with some of the experts we brought in to help us. And also at last January's monthly meeting, our group had found Lloyd Alter, the author. Actually, Carolyn found him in his book, Living the 1.5 Degree Lifestyle. For those who came to that meeting, we found that an inspiring book. It's a roadmap. It's an ambitious one. And it's also something we talk about. So that gives you some ideas about things that we've done. And we hope you'll think about joining us starting with next Tuesday. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It is so important. And I always feel encouraged by learning what can I make a difference by myself? Yes, I can. And I think that's what your group does for us. And I really appreciate that. Not alone. We're not alone is also a good message from your group. So thank you, Karen and Caroline. And next up, so we've heard from our interest groups, and following the meeting, we are going to send out a follow-up survey on the interest groups with information about how you can get involved and questions about your interests as well. So you can look forward to receiving that. And now we're going to hear from Peggy Liswood and Michael Barclay. They're going to talk to us about future directions for the Climate Action Club. So Peggy, I think you are going to start us off.
Actually, Michael is going to start, Judy.
Okay, so I invite Michael to begin, and then Peggy will follow Michael in this presentation.
Great, thanks. So future directions, where do we go from here? So let me talk a little bit about the Climate Action Club and its history. We were formed just at the same time as the pandemic happened. Well, it was formed a little bit before that, but it sort of became a sort of live organization in early 2020, just as the pandemic started. So we've been pretty much only online. There have been a couple events that have happened in person where we could, in those few windows of opportunity where we could get together. We had a pub session. We had one of the climate advocacy group met as a subgroup met, and we had some outdoor picnics and outdoor events when outdoor events were all the rage. But we originally were driven by this need for a few people who had taken some courses at the Life Institute where climate change was discussed. It was either a focus or it was part of the courses. And people came together, a very small number of people came together after that event and said, well, we can't just listen to these issues and not do something about it. We have to continue the conversation, we have to learn more, and we have to start advocating for change. And that was sort of the Climate Action Club within the Life Institute. There's been steady growth of membership, as you can see on the slide. It's went from 20 to in June when we had 100, and these would have been people who were Life Institute members. In July, as many of you who are Life Institute members on this call will remember, most of the educational the Life Institute went to Zoom. There were no live events. And the membership of the Life Institute dropped from about, I think, 2,400 to around 1,700. And the official club registrations dropped from the 100 that we had to a bit under 50. So this became an issue for the Climate Action Club to figure out how do we increase our messaging beyond this smaller group of 50. But the other thing that had happened is that we had some meetings that were open to the public, and we ended up with gathering we have 172 names as of today of people who are actually interested in what we're doing, but who are not Life Institute members. So that's sort of just statistically where we're at in terms of the kind of membership. So we have kind of a dual membership. We have Climate Action Club official members who are members of the Life Institute, and we have supporters who are outside of that group. So just to give you a sense of the kind of meetings that we had that we've had in the Climate Action Club, the ones with the tick marks are ones that we did ourselves, that we brought in people from our club to do presentations, or we had sort of inside knowledge that we were able to present to the rest of the club members. And then we also then brought in people to give webinars or courses, or to provide us with information that would help us further understand what the issues were around global heating and around greenhouse gas emissions, and really what were the issues that we really had to address as a community. And in 2021, we have been following that same pattern, where we have done some of more events that were done by club members, because as we've gone along in this journey over the last 2 years, a lot of us have learned quite a bit about what needs to be done, and have been reading voraciously and watching YouTube videos and all the other ways that we learn these days. And we've also had the opportunity to have a few people present on books that they have written that we felt were quite useful, such as Mark Jacquard and David Miller. So that's sort of what we've been doing. This year we had Lloyd Alter with the Living 1.5 Degree Lifestyle, and of course this Townhall. So that's what we as a club have been doing over the last 2 years. So this is really the crux of why we wanted this town hall, actually. We believe that climate change is an existential crisis, that we are in a situation where we all have to come together to try to resolve an issue that threatens the future of the next generations. And since we grew out of an organization of lifelong learners, the Life Institute, we know that learning is a big part of what we need to do. That we can't expect that everybody knows everything about climate change. We need to bring people along and move people from sort of curiosity about the climate to action. And you can see that in the pyramid, that we follow this kind of pyramid, that we think that we want to be open to people at every level of understanding of what climate change is about. We want to attract people who are curious. We want to provide knowledge, and we want them to begin to develop a belief that action is required and to move there. Our success really depends on reaching as many people as we can. And the model that we have within the Climate Action Club challenges that, because we are restricted by the membership in the Life Institute, which has been dropping, and therefore our access to people within the Life Institute has been dropping. And so we have been struggling with that issue now for over a year on what to do about this, and we've come up with a solution. And I'll pass it, I think, to Peggy now.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. And so in terms of the solution, and in order to further our mission, as Michael said, of reaching out to as many people as possible, we've established a new unincorporated association. The name of the association is Climate Action for Lifelong Learners. The acronym is CALL, C-A-L-L. And you can see that this is our new and I think fantastic logo. And I want to thank, on behalf of the club, Carolyn Taylor for her initiative here. I think you'll all agree that it's great. Speaks to action. Can I have the next slide, Carolyn? So being an unincorporated association will give us the independence and flexibility, and therefore the ability to amplify our work. As an unincorporated association, we will be able to create our own purpose, have our own vision, mission, and set our own policies. We can invite anyone who's interested in climate change. We can reach out to family, friends, neighbors, colleagues, and members of other climate organizations. So we're not limited to a group within the Life Institute, but we can go well beyond that. We have the ability to develop affiliations with other climate organizations. We'll have a wider and greater scope for doing advocacy work as we see fit. And we'll have an opportunity to have our own website and to have a social media presence. Can I have the next slide? So what will CALL look like? So first of all, CALL will be open to anyone who's interested in the climate change arena. Our focus will be on lifelong learners who tend towards 50 plus. So that's our focus, but again, as I said, it's entirely open. The basic structure is not going to change. So we're going to continue as usual, business as usual. We'll have our monthly educational meetings and webinars. Michael's already given you the list of that. We will continue to have the interest groups that you've heard today. And I really encourage you to join, either just to come in, just to take a look at one of the groups or actually join. We're going to continue to have the special ad hoc working groups. And we'll continue to have a leadership team that currently has 8 volunteer members. So nothing there is going to change. From a financial point of view, we foresee that we're going to be a no or a low cost operation as we have been. We don't anticipate any fees. And you might not be aware that we have free access to Zoom and email outreach program that's provided by the Future Ground Network, which is part of the David Suzuki Foundation. And at some point in the future, we will consider voluntary donations if needed, because there might be some expenses. An example here would be an ad-free website that would incur a small hosting charge. And I have the next slide. So in summary, there is, again, you will not notice that there's going to be any change to your overall experience. The emails and notices that come out will look very much the same. we have been in discussions with Life for quite some time about how we can partner with them. So various models have been looked at. Nothing yet has been decided. It's business as usual as far as Life is concerned. But we anticipate partnering with various other learning, later life learning organizations. And the model that we establish with Life could well serve as a model for our relationship with these other organizations. So I know that there's lots to talk about. You might have obviously further questions and thoughts of your own, visions that you'd like to see for the club. And there's going to be an opportunity to discuss this new direction in our breakout rooms.
So after the breakout groups, we want to hear, and there were 4 of us, so we want to hear a brief report from the note taker from each of those groups. So let me just start. I'm just going to pick a name out of a hat and say, what am I going to say? I'm going to say Caroline Taylor. I believe you're a note taker in your group. Would you please share with us some of your discussions and what you heard? Just a reminder, our questions were, what are your thoughts about what you've heard? And what are your hopes for the future? Caroline.
Thank you so much, and I'll be brief. We had some nice discussion. We have one person who joined us from BC, so he was the poster child of what we're trying to do with CALL. So we clarified that the main reason we're doing this is to be able to broaden our membership, not just to grow the size of the group, but to increase our reach to those who are climate concerned and bring more of us together. Everyone was in favor of proceeding with CALL. A couple of concerns were noted, and one was a logistical one that we'll navigate, which is when face-to-face is more possible for our meetings, we'll have to figure out whether in-person meetings, and I guess this is on a city-by-city basis, getting rooms available for that or getting places to do that could be a bit of a challenge, but of course we always have the Zoom default. There were a few people who already had their own colleagues in mind, people that they were going to invite, and people were saying that that the encouragement of this group is really helpful, and that one person shared that this club, this organization helps her, and I'd say this is true for me too, stay focused on climate change and keep it uppermost. And so that's really everything in a nutshell. And I'll invite Karen Sadler-Brown, if there's anything I forgot, please unmute yourself.
Only comment was one I liked so much was that this club had helped people keep their sanity. Me too.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
That's great. Thank you very much. And yes, the COVID sanity was a really nice benefit of this club, along with the many other benefits. I'm going to call on Sharon Zeeler now to report on the discussion in her group.
Okay, I have to say that following Carolyn really makes this very easy, because I would say our group was very similar in content. People were very happy to hear that we have taken this move to expand our reach. And several people gave us some really good suggestions about ways to do that with different clubs that they belong to, different ratepayers associations. So I have noted all those down, and we will be in touch with you about doing that, because people felt that this was that their groups would be interested. So that's a great way of expanding. And several people were really happy to hear that we have taken this move so that we can expand, because they're just raring to go. And one person pointed out that perhaps our club could really serve as a conduit to help people really see where their interest lies and what could become a burning passion or a really strong focus for them. And he felt that that was a very important thing that we can do as a club. And it sounds like several people in the first group also talked about, keeping the focus on climate change. Just one, question arose about a legal question about becoming an unincorporated association versus a incorporated association, but we can explore that further. But in general, at the end, Peggy asked, okay, everybody thumbs up, and everyone in our group gave us the thumbs up. So we were very happy about that.
Oh, Sharon,
Just-
thank
yeah,
you. Yeah,
I just,
Peggy, go ahead.
yeah, just as the facilitator there, one question I thought was kind of interesting as well, Sharon, was just the idea that if we really expand our reach, there might be a challenge in keeping it local, like how to address both very local issues as well as wider issues. So that sort of might necessarily be a challenge, but we also talked about how some of that could be accommodated in the interest groups so that we can have a wide reach and yet keep it local. So that was an interesting issue. So that's it. Thanks, Sharon.
Super. So it sounds like your discussion was went very well also. Now in my group, I had to call upon a volunteer, and Rick Blickstead kindly volunteered to be the note taker for our group. And so I'm going to call on him now to let you know what we talked about.
I will try to avoid points that have already been made. The first was, we were fortunate to have Barbara discuss Life Institute's longer term strategy and where partnerships fit in that. So I thought that was it was good for us to understand that. I think the majority of people thought this was a great move, and that it would widen the participation, and also, of course, allow us to partner with other groups. Then one of them was the Bruce Trail group, which, again, people who are not necessarily on the periphery of climate change, but love nature and would have an affinity to it. I think that we also talked about being able to get different perspectives and bigger inclusivity and diversity. There were some points that were brought up. I mean, one of my fears is unintended consequences. Before you know it, you will have local chapters, you will have a national organization, and then you'll have executives in local chapters. I mean, I've seen this happen. I think you have to be very careful of that. One of our group sort of said, bigger isn't better. There's an intimacy about us being on this call and seeing each other. We've all been on calls with 500 people or 300 people. What happens to that? And so all of a sudden, the intimacy of the club begins to dissipate. There are ways of dealing with that, but I mean, that was the other was, don't spread the peanut butter too thin. What makes us unique may be lost by trying to be bigger. And so how do you manage to do that? These are just questions, of course, that people raise that can be dealt with, but certainly there was support for moving forward with this strategy. Judy, did I miss anything that I should have said that I didn't?
No, super. I was going to say that's great. You expressed the views, and we had pros and cons in our discussion. And going forward, there's some things that we really need to pay attention to keep what we have while we grow and share it. So no, thanks so much for doing that, Rick. Appreciate it. And our last group, I'm going to call on Joanne Hunter to report back on, give us a summary of what was discussed in your group, Joanne.
Thank you. Our group was composed of some newer members, very new, and some who have been with us for some time. We didn't have a vote on on whether we should move forward with this, but lots of good reflective questions came up. Generally, people seemed positive about it and felt like it was a good opportunity to invite friends and neighbors and family members to come and join us and benefit from what we provide. There were questions about whether we would continue to meet in person and what that would mean, what our vision would be in terms of working with other lifelong learning institutions. We talked about our relationship with other organizations like the Chang School. Michael gave a little bit of history about Chang and TAN and what that might look like. Here. There was concern about potential duplication with other groups. So for example, should we continue with advocacy within our organization when there's so many other groups out there doing advocacy, and that our real strength was on doing education and outreach. So that maybe we should be looking at focusing on that. And then if you're interested in things like advocacy, to perhaps join with other groups. That really, we had a little discussion on this education versus advocacy. And some people felt like it was a really good opportunity to engage, to continue to link with other groups who may have slightly different ways of doing things, but similar objectives, and that we could, from that, we could be stronger and we can accomplish more and be more efficient. We determined that it'll become clear as time goes on how we'll make links with other organizations and become stronger. And Michael, I don't know if you want to add something else to what we talked about.
I think that's good. That's great. Thanks.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much to the note takers from our groups. Really great summaries and work that we need to do and thoughts that we need to expand upon. But I think that I hear positive notes in every summary, and I'm looking forward to seeing our future, how we move forward with this. So it's getting towards the end and towards 11:30. So I would like to just wrap it up with the action of the day and our upcoming meetings, and invite you all to, those that can, to stay with us to continue the conversation once we formally close the meeting. So I heard the action of the day in the reports from the groups. And so really what we want to do is say, invite a friend to join us as we work to address this existential crisis. I have to work on that. Join us as we work to address climate change. Your friends, family, neighbors, colleagues are all welcome at our meetings and events. So ask them to join you. And if you do that, we'll be growing right away, and everybody is welcome. So let's see what happens. Next, let's move to upcoming events. And in fact, the Nature-Based Solutions Group has an event tomorrow. It's at 10 a.m. on Zoom, although that little piece of information is missing, but 10 a.m. on Zoom tomorrow. The Nature-Based Solutions Interest Group is hosting a guest speaker, Michael Poliani from Nature Canada. I'm sure that will be interesting. And the other interest groups, Individual Action, is meeting on February the 8th. The leadership team, who you heard from today, will be meeting on February the 9th, and will be pulling together the feedback from today's meeting and moving forward and communicating that out to you. The Advocacy Interest Group is meeting on the 16th of February, and our next monthly meeting, March the 2nd, Julia Baum from the University of Victoria will speak on the effect of climate change on our oceans. Can I just ask Joanne, is that meeting going to be at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, March the 2nd?
No, it's not. It's going to be at 1 o'clock. We've changed the time because Julia is, she lives on the West Coast. And so she's, there's a time difference. So we decided to accommodate her and make our meeting later.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification, Joanne. So special note, the monthly meeting, the first Wednesday in March, Wednesday, March 2nd, will be at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It'll be very interesting. You can just bring your lunch and join the meeting. So, and Joanne is organizing that. Thank you very much. And I think with that, I'm going to wrap up the meeting. And as I said, I invite you to stay in chat to carry on this conversation. And if you're not able to stick around today, there'll be more conversations about call and what that means and how it's going to look. And you'll be involved in those conversations as well. So thank you so much for today's meeting, your participation. And thanks so much to our speakers who provided us with lots of information about our club and other ways. I know there were new ways I can get involved. So I hope you heard that too. Thanks very much, everybody.